So I want to teach accurate terminology, so I'm going to just bring up a few terms in the LGBT community. If you haven't seen this episode of Golden Girls, it's, I think, the best episode they've ever had, where Dorothy is played by B. Arthur, has a friend come and stay with them, and she's lesbian, and she falls in love with Rose, who's played by Betty White. And so Blanche, who's played by Rue McClanahan, they try to tell her that this is happening, and she says, Blanche says, well, I don't have a problem with that. Isn't Danny Thomas one? And Danny Thomas, if you don't know, some of you may be too young, was Lebanese. So then Dorothy has to say to her, not Lebanese, Blanche, lesbian. It's very funny. So here are some terms that I would like you to be aware of, and I'll be saying more as I do this, as we continue on. You don't want to use the term homosexual. You don't say homosexual client, homosexual couple. The only people that use that term as an adjective to describe us are people in the right-wing, anti-gay side of things that say there's nothing gay about being homosexual. And so here's the deal. Younger LGBT are like, I don't mind that word. They don't mind the word homosexual because they were never part of a culture that said, if you're homosexual, you're going to be dishonorably discharged from the military. There were questions and forms in hospitals and police reports, are you a known homosexual? And then you'd be blamed for the crime that was committed against you. So because you don't know which client's going to be okay with it and who's not, I wouldn't use it. I just think, because you have to remember, we grow up LGBT and we learn, are you safe or are you dangerous? Is this space safe or is it dangerous? We're looking around your office. Is there anything LGBT friendly or not? The words we're listening, if you use the word homosexual, we might think that you might be somebody who is anti-gay or just at least even untrained. I don't assume that I know what any term means anymore. I've done so much online, and I'll say, here's what bisexual means. And I'll be doing that here. Here's what pansexual means. And then I'll get all these attacks. No, pansexual means bisexual. And you got it all wrong. It means this, it means that. Everybody has their own definition today. So I don't assume. So you can tell me that you're lesbian. Maybe you put it on the intake form. And then you come into my office and I ask, how do you self-identify? I think that's an important question for therapists to ask. How do you self-identify? And if they tell me they're lesbian, I don't assume I know what that means. It tells me nothing about her sexual history. It tells me nothing about her current sexual behavior. She might be having sex with men. She might be having sex with trans men. I don't know. So I'll say to them, can you tell me your definition of what lesbian means for you? And then sometimes people get put out like, wait a minute, you're the gender and sex therapist. You should know. I'm not going to assume because the person before you and the person after you may have completely different definitions. So I really encourage you I've actually had some straight people come in, heterosexuals, and self-identify as queer. How do you like that, right? So, and the gay community hates that. LGBT is like, oh, well, you can't identify as queer. You don't know, you didn't suffer like we did and all this stuff. Well, whatever they want is not what people do. So and I'll say to straight people, so why do you have self-identify as queer? What does that mean to you? Define it. And they say, because I want the wiggle room to be fluid. Sometimes I'm a little bit open to same-sex experiences, and I don't want to be boxed into only heterosexual. You want to stay away from asking preferred pronouns. They're not preferences. What are your pronouns? We're starting to get away from hormone replacement therapy for trans people. And you want to ask instead hormone therapy. You don't want to say alternative lifestyle, because for me as a gay guy, straight life is an alternative lifestyle. So, and it's not a lifestyle, we're a community. You would say that. All right. So you're going to be hearing me talk about all these terms, and some of them you can see are political, and we're not getting into a political debate. I wouldn't do that. I'll be ignoring your comment or question, because that's not what we're here for. My job is to teach you the psychological consequences of the politics. The psychological consequences of the politics. That's what we want to talk about. So it takes the position, the LGBT affirmative therapy, however you want to call it. If you want to identify as LGBT affirmative psychotherapy on your website, some people say queer affirmative therapy. Sometimes that includes social justice. Some people want that. Some clients are looking for that in a therapist. But all of it takes the position that there's nothing wrong with the LGBT person. What's wrong is what's done. to LGBT individuals and couples. And it takes a position that being LGBT is more than just a sexual. So I'm not wearing my wedding ring right now, but my husband and I have wedding rings. We had a wedding and everything, and now we're legally married. And when I go across the world and people see my wedding ring, they say, "Oh, you're married?" Yes. What is your wife's name? Is often the, and I'll say, "I don't have a wife. I have a husband, and his name is Mike." Usually, men over 45 will back away. You can see the blood leave from the top of their head all the way out their feet, and they're like, "Dude, I'm not gay," because they didn't hear the word gay. They heard the word sex, and they didn't hear just sex. They heard belt buckles to the floor. Let's get busy and be sexual together. Which I say none of that. I'm just telling them I'm gay. So I have to say to them, "Dude, I didn't think you were gay. I'm just telling you I am. You misunderstood. My wedding ring is to a man, not to a woman." So those kinds of things are things we have to grapple with. The world that we live in, you're assumed to be straight. And by the way, you're assumed to be Christian. I don't know if I said I was also Jewish in my intersectional identities, but I always have to come out as a Jew on Christmas and holidays, Easter. People, I live in a place, area here in Michigan where it's predominantly Gentile, non-Jewish. And people say Merry Christmas to me all the time. And I will politely say, "Oh, thank you, but I'm Jewish." And then they'll say Happy Hanukkah. I really haven't had anybody go, "Dude, I'm not Jewish," although there's anti-Semitism is on the rise now. So who knows, it could happen. But I've never had that, but I have had somebody say, "Dude, I'm not gay." So if we're more than sexual, we're affectionate, we're psychologically geared toward our same sex, emotionally, spiritually, romantically. And listen, if I never have sex with another day in my life with a man, I'm still gay. It doesn't fade away. It doesn't fall away. And yes, we're sexual too, though. We're equally as sexual, if not more sometimes, than straight people. And it's not just a behavior or sex act. So this is probably my biggest pet peeve about our community, in the LGBT community. I worked my butt off, and so did people in my generation and the generations before, to make sure people understood that what you do in bed does not define who you are. So if I have sex tomorrow with a woman in bed and we have an exchange, I don't turn straight. It doesn't make me bi. It makes me a gay man who ends up having sex with a woman. That can happen. It happens all the time. Lesbians have sex with men. Lesbians partner up and have sex with trans men. There's all kinds of configurations, but that the sexual connection it might overlap with your orientation, but this is where I like people to understand your erotic orientation is different than your sexual orientation. And why I said it's my pet peeve is the LGBT community, younger, 30 and younger, nope, they disagree with me. If you go to bed with a man, you're gay. If you go to bed with a woman, you're not fully gay. You're bi, you're straight. It's ridiculous. It's just not true. It's not true. And I'm not going to talk about this here at length, but when I do my longer trainings, we talk about heterosexually married gay men and women who've been in long-term loving, sexually pleasurable marriages who come out later. They were never bi. They were only in love with this person. The person they met of the opposite sex is their person. So they were able to have a quality and pleasurable sex life with them, but they're not attracted to other people of the opposite sex. That doesn't make you bi. It makes you, actually what they're calling it online, I saw it somewhere and I loved it, gay plus one, right? You're gay plus one, and your plus one is the person that you found love with.